I have a track that is relatively quiet compared to the rest of the tracks on the record. What's the best way to raise the gain on the track without affecting the mix? First, let's talk. Quiet could mean a number of things, right? Because true peak, if the true peak is much lower, then you can just use a gain knob and bring everything up, and the true peaks will match. But if the integrated loudness throughout the song is lower, and the true peak is already as high as it can go, I think the only way to make it, to raise the integrated loudness in LUFS, is to use dynamic range compression. Because if you just turn up the knob, won't the true peak go above 0 dB full
But
scale?
he said, yes, Kyle, but he said without affecting the mix. And if you put on dynamics control, you're affecting the mix. It's going to sound
Definitely.
different by doing that. You're going to get that compressor involved in the sound. And, not everybody wants to smell that. I think the trick here is to first recognize how you got yourself into the problem in the first place, which is, generally speaking, mixing day to day to day to day without having a check-in, or not listening to what you did the day before you started, and then not listening to what you did the day before you started. Like, you have to, before you begin, I think it's good mix practice to listen to the things. If you're mixing on a record, tracks 1, 2, and 3 have to be listened to in a row before you start mixing track 4. And I mean the day you're mixing track 4, so that you are checking in to make sure you're not starting off quiet. And you want to make sure that your monitoring environment is consistent. So calibrating your monitoring environment so that you're hearing things at a consistent level will keep one track from coming out quiet. When you're mixing on a record, you have to use different skills than when you're just mixing one track at a time. And I think sometimes it's easy when you first begin to just do one track at a time and not think about the arc of the record. But that is definitely a skill that you develop over time as a mix engineer when you work on records. And I think now it's less of an issue because people listen on shuffle instead of the record anymore. But I still really prescribe to this, and I try to, I never not do this. It's always a part of my process, that I'll have that reference listening that's my own reference to make sure I'm not mixing quiet. For this, if it sounds relatively quiet, I would start by, if I'm in Pro Tools, selecting my all group, so that, and just raising just drawing automation in on everybody up 3 dB at a time. And then if I'm starting to get peaks, the question is like, well, where are the peaks happening? And if it's not something where you can bring the peaks down in those sections of the song, then, that's as loud as it gets. And the other thing I got to say is, like, maybe it's not a problem to have a quiet track. It doesn't mean something's wrong. If it feels, I rarely have I had a situation where a track comes out of a previous track and it feels so quiet that it's just not related to the record anymore. And I couldn't fix it with volume automation, just drifting everybody's level up. It's fine to have a quiet track. I think that's part of healthy dynamics. The question about how to do it without affecting the mix is you can't change the mix. The mix is, if it's overall level, that's overall level. Anything you do to change the envelope or the content of the frequencies inside that mix is changing the mix. So you can't use a compressor to do it, and you can't use any other hocus pocus. You just have to get in there and bend the level up, like the volume automation. You could do it on the master fader, or you could do it on the individual tracks. I would prefer to do it on the individual tracks, feeding the master and not the master. But that's how I would do it. You want to have a consistent, as Kyle was saying before, you want to have a consistent amount of headroom every time through. But then there's also the space inside the headroom that you also want to make full. So, Oh, and the last thing I say about this that I find is helpful, though not exactly what you're asking about. This is when it comes to loudness and making sure mixes are loud, I mix the loudest part of a song first, and then I back off to the less loud parts of the song. so that if you start with the quiet part of the song and you just add level as you go, you may never get to loud enough, or you may go too far in your clipping. So if I start with the loudest thing, I find that like it gives me the loudest part of the song, my peaks, my levels are there, and everything that I'm doing after that is backing off of that level. So I never have to worry about going over loud. And if I end up going too far down, well, that's easy. I just bring the level back up. But I know loud is loud, and I know how loud it's going to be. And I can make the loudest parts of every song the same every time I mix them by starting there. Loudest, 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 loudest from track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.